167 episodes, 4 years of watching, but the last thing Inuyasha gives you is Naraku still alive, the Shikan jewel still shattered, and every relationship the show spent years building left unresolved. That was September 13th, 2004. No finale, no announcement, just silence. 3 months later, a new Inuyasha movie hits theaters with full theatrical run, original villain, standalone plot, but nothing that moved the actual story forward by a single chapter. They couldn't finish the series, yet they could still sell tickets to it. By the end of this video, I'll show you how the companies behind Inuyasha spent 5 years profiting off an unfinished story, then gave it the cheapest conclusion they could get away with in a 2 AM time slot. Rumiko Takahashi launched the Inuyasha manga in Weekly Shonen Sunday in November 1996, and it became massive. 50 million copies sold worldwide across 56 volumes. Then Sunrise adapted it into an anime starting October 2000, while Yomiuri TV gave it their Monday 7 p.m. slot, known in the industry as the Golden Time. Primetime anime real estate. It blew up internationally too, with Adult Swim picking it up in 2002, and became one of the longest-running shows the block ever aired, outlasted only by Cowboy Bebop. But the anime was always chasing a manga that wasn't finished. Takahashi herself once told America that she didn't plan endings in advance, that she just figured them out as serialization progressed. Most channels will tell you the filler killed Inuyasha. That's not wrong, but it's not the entire story either. The committee padded the anime with 35 filler episodes, nearly 1 in 5 to keep the show on air and the ad revenue flowing, while Takahashi kept writing. The biggest stretch was a 13-episode filler block right in the middle of the series, but even with all that padding, the anime still caught up to the manga. Takahashi couldn't write fast enough to stay ahead of a weekly broadcast schedule, and the filler only delayed the inevitable. So the anime stopped, while the franchise continued making money. The day Inuyasha ended, Yomiuri TV didn't pause. 4 weeks later, on October 11th, Blackjack was sitting in its Monday 7 p.m. chair. Same slot, just a different show. The network didn't care that the anime was unfinished because the slot mattered more than the story. And over the next few years, that entire Monday anime block would pass through Kikaishi, then Yatterman, then Detective Conan, before YTV killed it entirely by 2009 for a news program because it attracted more viewers, which meant more advertisers, which meant more money. Inuyasha's old slot didn't just get replaced, it got eliminated. And here's the thing that should make you angry. Inuyasha didn't stop because it failed. It stopped because it succeeded in a way the committee couldn't sustain without more manga. And instead of pausing the slot and waiting for Takahashi to finish, they filled it with something else and kept cashing Inuyasha's checks on the side. Every other anime that got cancelled at least had the excuse of low ratings. Inuyasha was still pulling audiences, it just wasn't pulling new manga chapters fast enough to keep the machine fed. While the network moved on, the production committee kept extracting. Every December from 2001 to 2004, they released an Inuyasha movie, 4 in total, with a combined Japanese box office of over $20 million. None of them counted towards the actual story. All original villains, standalone plots, stories that deliberately avoided advancing Takahashi's manga even by 1 chapter. The 4th film hit theaters in December 2004, which was 3 months after the anime had been cancelled. The story was dead, but the brand was still making money. And the revenue didn't stop at theaters. Viz Media moved over 1 million Inuyasha home video copies in North America between 2003 and 2004 alone, eventually passing 2 million by 2016. Adult Swim ran the English dub from 2002 to 2006, and then kept airing reruns until 2014, which meant over a decade of US broadcast licensing fees from a show that had already been cancelled in Japan. Inuyasha won ICV2's Property of the Year in both 2004 and 2005, and in the second year, no new anime even existed. Video games, soundtracks, a light novel, character albums, even a 30-minute OVA shown at a Takahashi anniversary exhibit in 2008, all released during the gap. Think about what that means. For 5 years, every company on the production committee was collecting checks from an IP they had chosen not to finish. The manga was still running, Takahashi was still writing, and the fan base was still there. But nobody at the table needed to spend money on new anime because the old anime was still making them rich. The franchise didn't need a conclusion to stay profitable, it just needed the name. Takahashi finally wrapped the manga on June 18, 2008, and a year later, in July 2009, the announcement came: Inuyasha, the final act. Fans who had waited for 5 years celebrated. But when the details landed, the celebration quickly turned into disappointment. 26 episodes to cover the remaining 21 volumes of manga. Here's the math that damns the entire project. The original anime adapted roughly 36 volumes across 167 episodes, which works out to about 4.5 episodes per volume, and that already included filler padding the runtime even further. The final act had to cover 21 volumes in 26 episodes, roughly 1 volume per episode. That's a 5 to 6-fold acceleration in pacing, about 8 manga chapters crammed into every 20-minute episode. And this time, there was zero filler, not because they suddenly respected the source material, because they couldn't afford the airtime. The original had filler because they were stretching for money. The final act had none because they were compressing for money. Opposite directions, same engine. And the time slot told the whole story by itself. The original Inuyasha had Monday 7 p.m., the golden time, prime time. The final act aired on NTV at 2:20 a.m. on a Sunday. They gave the conclusion of one of the biggest anime franchises of the 2000s a graveyard slot. On top of that, the English dub lost several voice actors who had played these characters for years. Moneka Story, the voice of Kagome across the entire original run, had retired. David Kaye, who had been Sesshomaru, had moved to Los Angeles. New voices filled in. Maybe the production could have accommodated the original cast, but they didn't. So for fans who watched the dub, the characters didn't even sound like themselves anymore.
But the real damage was what the compression did to the story itself. Sesshomaru's entire arc, from cold-blooded demon to someone who learns compassion, who earns Bakusaiga not through power but through growth, got compressed into fragments, and you barely feel the transformation that Takahashi spent volumes constructing. Kohaku's multi-volume redemption was reduced to a handful of scenes. Sangwa and Miroku spent years building toward each other, and their payoff got rushed through like a footnote. Byakuya, Naraku's final incarnation, a character who carried real weight in the manga, barely registered on screen. And then there's Kagome's 3-year separation from the feudal era, the emotional climax Takahashi wrote as a slow ache across her final chapters. That separation is supposed to hurt. You're supposed to sit with it, feel the distance, and then feel the reunion land. Instead, it plays out so fast that the ending barely registers before the credits roll. Fans noticed immediately. IMDb reviews called the first 6 episodes nearly unwatchable because of the pacing, and critics pointed out the show was burning through roughly 8 seconds of screen time per page of manga. People had spent years with these characters, only to watch their resolutions fly past in a blur. The frustration wasn't that the final act existed. It was that after 5 years of waiting, this was all they got. A speed run through the most important arcs in the story, delivered like someone was trying to check a box rather than finish a narrative. 5 years of silence, and the reward was a 2 a.m. slot and a pace that couldn't let a single moment breathe. And the business logic behind it is simple. A 2-core, 26-episode order is the cheapest commitment that qualifies as a real TV series in Japan. A proportional adaptation would have required around 90 to 100 episodes. The committee gave the franchise the minimum viable conclusion.
Here's what makes this worse than just a bad business decision. The production committee model isn't unique into Inuyasha, but Inuyasha is the case study that shows what happens when nobody at the table actually cares about the story. The show is run by a committee: Sunrise, Shogakukan, Yomiuri TV, NTV, Toho, and Showpro. No single party could greenlight the anime alone, and all of them profited whether or not new episodes existed. There was no financial penalty for leaving the story unfinished. And Sunrise's own history tells you everything you need to know. A studio founded to make anime that sells toys, acquired by Bandai in 1994, folded into Bandai Namco by 2005. Inuyasha was always an outlier in a catalog built around original IP, like Gundam and Code Geass, franchises they owned outright. A shonen adaptation where Shogakukan held the rights meant shared profits and less control. So it was treated as a commercial asset, not a creative flagship. And if you need proof that the system learned nothing, look at Yashahime, premiering in 2020 on the exact 11th anniversary of the final act with Takahashi's name on the poster. Inuyasha and Kagome were written out of their own sequel for most of the first season, trapped inside the Black Pearl so the show could justify their absence while still using their names to sell it. Sanga was reduced to a housewife with no agency. Fan reception was brutal. Critics called it a cash grab, and viewers called it the most disappointing anime sequel ever made. But here's the detail that should sit with you. They found the budget for 48 episodes of a sequel nobody asked for, but couldn't fund 90 episodes to properly finish the story everyone was waiting for. 48 episodes of nostalgia bait, 26 for the actual ending. That tells you everything about what the committee values and what it doesn't.
Inuyasha didn't get a rushed ending because someone at Sunrise was lazy, or because the story was too big to adapt properly. It got a rushed ending because the companies that owned it had already figured out how to make money without finishing it, and when they finally did finish it, they spent as little as possible. 50 million manga sales, over $20 million in theatrical box office, millions in DVDs across 2 continents, a decade of broadcast licensing, and the best they could do was a 2 a.m. time slot, 26 episodes for 21 volumes, and 0 filler, not out of respect, but out of budget. The franchise was never treated as a story that needed to be completed. It was an asset to extract value from, too profitable to abandon, but never profitable enough to do right. And Inuyasha wasn't the only franchise they squeezed dry, but that's a story for next time.